Hey, what's up guys, it's Chris with Multimedia. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Uno Synth Pro. But more specifically, we're going to be talking about the mod matrix in the Uno Synth Pro. So if you're not sure what a mod matrix is or how it works, I suggest you stick around. Another thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to compare the mod matrix of the Uno Synth Pro to a modular synthesizer. So if you've ever looked at a modular synthesizer and thought, no way, I could never wrap my head around something like that, don't worry, because understanding how the mod matrix on the Uno Synth Pro works will really help you understand how a modular synthesizer works. Another cool thing that we can do is we can use the modular synthesizer to give us a visual representation of what's going on under the hood when we use the mod matrix on the Uno Synth Pro. Now, if you're a visual learner like me, this can be really helpful to grasp these concepts. And lastly, we're going to use the modulation matrix to make some patches on the Uno Synth Pro. This is just so we can practice what we've learned, and you guys can see some real world examples on how a mod matrix can be used for sound design. So without further ado, let's get started. So if we go into Google and search what is a modulation matrix, this is what we'll get. The modulation matrix is basically a system for mapping controllers to various destinations on your synth. In offering multiple sources and destinations, the mod matrix provides the user with an amount of control similar to that of a modular system. So what exactly does that mean? And I think the best way to show you guys is by drawing you guys a picture. So what I have here is a very basic signal flow chart for a synthesizer. We have a synthesizer with two oscillators that are going through a mixer. Then from the mixer, they're going to a filter. And from the filter, they're going out to a VCA. We can see that there are two envelope generators, one that is pre-patched to the filter and another one that's pre-patched to the VCA. We can also see that there's an LFO that's currently not pointing to anything. So this right here is going to be the signal flow for my synthesizer anytime I initialize a patch. So when I have a clean slate, this is what it looks like. That is until we change it. And the way that we're going to change it is using a modulation matrix. So with the modulation matrix, I can say, hey LFO, I want you to modulate the filter cutoff. And just like that, the LFO is now pointing to the filter cutoff and it's modulating. The filter is opening and closing with the LFO. Another cool thing that we can do with the modulation matrix is that we can rearrange how a synthesizer signal flow is originally patched. For example, I want to make a kick drum with my synthesizer. And I know that in order to make a kick drum, I'm going to need to modulate the pitch of an oscillator with an envelope. So I can go into the mod matrix and say, hey envelope 1, instead of modulating the filter, please modulate oscillator 1 pitch and oscillator 2's pitch. And from there, I can go ahead and make my kick drum. This is what makes synthesizers with modulation matrices really powerful. This means I can completely change the modulation inside the synthesizer, save it to a preset, and recall it later whenever I want. And that to me is pretty awesome. So that's enough theory. Let's take a look at how the Uno Synth modulation matrix works. So here we are with the Uno Synth Pro, and before I start going over the mod matrix and how it works, I want to show you guys a preset I made using the Uno Synth Pro and the mod matrix, just so you guys can get an idea of what type of sounds we can get from it. So check it out. So that's a really popular sound. I'm sure you can recognize it. And it's actually a really simple sound. It doesn't require that much modulation, but you do need a mod matrix to make it happen. So basically all it is, it's the three oscillators being modulated. The three pitches of the oscillators being modulated by a envelope. And that's how you get that sound. So let's go ahead and see how the modulation matrix works on the Uno Synth Pro. So now we have an empty preset on the Uno Synth Pro, and it is just a square wave, and this is what it sounds like. Right now it's not too interesting, but we can spice it up using the modulation matrix. So in order to access the modulation matrix, we just need to press this matrix button on the Synth Pro. And the name is really fitting because it's like taking the red pill in the matrix. After you take the red pill, there's no going back. Your world is changed forever. So let's go ahead and press it and see what happens. So nothing really happens right away, and that was a little anticlimactic, but bear with me. So the first knob here controls the modulation number, and this basically is the amount of slots we have for modulation. Per patch, we have 16 slots of modulation, which is crazy. That means we can reroute the signal 16 times per patch, save it, recall it for a preset. That's pretty crazy. And it makes the synthesizer really powerful. So next we have the source, and this is where we pick the modulator we want to use. If you guys remember from our diagram, we picked the LFO to affect the filter cutoff. So under source is where I would pick the LFO. So if we look here at all the different parameters we can pick, you can actually see that we have an LFO here. Where are you? There you go. So we could use this to send an LFO to the destination. The destination is what's being modulated, right? So in our example with the LFO and the filter cutoff, the destination would be where I picked the filter cutoff. And there's a bunch of different stuff that we can pick. But here we have a filter cutoff. We can do that. And lastly, we have the amount, which is going to allow us to choose how much modulation we want to send to our destination. So let's go ahead and send the LFO to the filter cutoff and see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first modulation slot. And from here, I'm going to pick the LFO 1. Now we're going to select the destination, which is going to be the filter cutoff 1. And then we have to select the amount. So right now I'm going to do 100% so we can really hear what's going on. And if I press a key, you guys should hear the LFO modulating the filter cutoff. Now if we lower the amount, the effect decreases. So this really allows us to fine tune how we want to affect the destination. So if we go into the LFO page now, we can actually change the rate of the LFO and it should affect the filter cutoff. We can actually change the wave as well. So now that LFO is affecting the filter cutoff. And this is basically how a modular synthesizer works. And I'm going to go ahead and prove that to you guys. So check it out. So here we are with the modular synthesizer. And I know this can look super overwhelming, but I promise I'm going to break it down for you guys. So I have a really simple patch going. It's a oscillator, a square wave, just like how we had in the other one, going into a filter and going out through a VC8. And this is what it sounds like. So if I open that filter, you guys can really hear the square wave. And just like we did on the Synth Pro, we want an LFO to modulate the cutoff filter. So I have an LFO here. It's a module right next to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the LFO to a attenuverter, which is this guy over here, up here. And from there, we are going to go into the filter cutoff. So the module up here is basically going to be our amount knob on the Synth Pro. So right now we're not really hearing any difference in the sound. But if I start turning the attenuverter, you guys are going to start hearing it open up. And this works just like the amount knob on the Synth Pro. So check it out. So this patch is pretty much the same thing that is happening in the Synth Pro when we use the modulation matrix. So when we are sending the signal and doing all that stuff, this is what's going on under the hood of the Synth Pro, which is really awesome. This also means that your Synth Pro is super powerful. It behaves like a modular synthesizer. It's not quite a modular synthesizer, but it can get some really complex modulations that you could get from a modular synthesizer. Okay, so now we're back with the Synth Pro, and let's go ahead and elaborate on this patch a little more. So we still have the same patch as before, the LFO modulating the filter. It sounds like this. So let's go in the matrix. Let's go into the matrix, and we're gonna select modulation slot number 2. And now we can modulate more. So another cool thing that we can do is we can actually send copies of the same modulation to different destinations. So I'm gonna send the same LFO There we go. I'm going to send the same LFO. And now instead of the filter, I also want it to affect the pitch of all the oscillators. And then we need to set the amount. And let's see what that sounds like. So let's change the rate on that LFO. Go back to the matrix and the amount on the pitch. So we can actually send multiple sources to a different destination. So you don't have to worry about like, oh man, I used my LFO on that filter. Like I can't use it anymore. No, you can send it to any destination. And specifically in the Synth Pro, you can do it up to 16 times if you want to. And this works just like a modular synthesizer. So let's see what that looks like. So here we're back with the modular synthesizer. And just like the Synth Pro, we had that original patch of the LFO affecting the cutoff filter. And it sounds like this. And now we want that same LFO to affect the pitch of the oscillator. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this. And we're going to send it to the pitch of the oscillator. And there we have pretty much the same patch that we had on the Synth Pro. So the reason I keep showing you guys this is so you guys can really understand what's going on under the hood of the Synth Pro when you're using the mod matrix. And it's pretty much working like a modular synthesizer, which makes it super powerful. And I know I keep saying that, but I really mean it, because if you think about it, this modular synthesizer costs a lot of money. You have to buy each individual module, put it all together, you have to buy a case, and it can be very expensive. So some of these modules are actually more expensive than an Synth Pro. And I'm not saying that to flex or show off, but it is the reality of the situation. If you want to go off the deep end with a modular synthesizer, you can expect to spend a lot of money. And this actually makes the Synth Pro incredible value. I mean, you're getting a really powerful synthesizer for the fraction of the cost. So maybe if you're starting out, I'd probably recommend going with something like the Synth Pro, because it's going to give you a really powerful synthesizer. You're still going to get the experience of some really complex modulation for a fraction of the cost. That's also not to say that the Synth Pro is targeted for beginners, because it really isn't. It's not at all. One of the downsides of a modular synthesizer is that the second I pull out these cables, my patch is gone. So on one side, this is good because it forces me to commit into my recording. So if I get a cool patch, I got to record it, then it's gone forever, and I have to work with that. But on the downside, that patch is gone forever. So I could, write down every patch I've made and what position was where, what knob was where to get my patch back. But honestly, in a setting where you're making music, this can really get you out of the zone. I used to work at a recording studio, and one of the things I hated was recalling mixes with analog gear. I mean, we had this huge patch bay, and I would sit there probably an hour before the session just making sure every single knob was where it was and every single patch was where it was. And this can be like really uninspiring, and that's why the mixing engineer had me do it, and he didn't have to do it. So he could just go in, get in the zone, and do the work. What I'm trying to say is that if you are a working musician and you need to be able to recall your presets and you still want a powerful synthesizer, the Synth Pro is the way to go. You can get super complex sounds for the fraction of the cost of a modular synthesizer, and you can recall them whenever you need to. So if you're changing songs and you need to change the preset on the Synth, you don't have to worry that it's going to be gone forever. You can just save it, recall it later, and that is pretty amazing. So I think it's time to start making some patches on the Synth Pro. So here we're back with the Synth Pro, and let's just go ahead and start making a patch from scratch. So I got a brand new preset that's been initialized. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the mix knob, and I want to turn all the oscillators on, make sure that they're sounding. And I also want to turn the noise up a bit, so we can hear it. Cool. Everything's at 100. Next thing I want to do is I want to go to the oscillator. And for oscillator 1, I'm going to change the tune. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to hit oscillator again, and I'm going to choose the waveforms. So oscillator 1 sort of saw wave. I want to do the same thing for oscillator 2. And a little bit of a square wave for oscillator 3. The next thing I want to do is I want to go mess with the tunings of these oscillators. Let me lower this an octave. Let's actually sync oscillator 3. And we're going to go back and tune it up. So whenever you sync an oscillator to another one, you really want to turn the tune on it or the pitch. You're going to get some really crazy sounds. So check it out. And then I'm going to go ahead and lower the volume for oscillator 3. So I kind of want the LFO to take care of that right there. I want it to move the tune knob for oscillator 3. So I'm going to go here in the matrix. I'm going to choose mod 1. I'm going to find LFO 1. There we go. And then I'm going to choose oscillator 3 tune. And let's see what that sounds like. Okay, you can hear it in the background. The LFO is a little too fast. I'm going to sync it so it's synced to the BPM. And let's see what that sounds like. Maybe we don't want it synced, so it's lower. Turn it off. Sounding pretty good. It's still a little too loud for me. I'm gonna lower oscillator 3. Cool. Next thing I want to do is I want to go over here in preset. I'm going to hit that. Under oscillators, change the glide, maybe around 30%. Nice. We can actually have the LFO move between these waveforms. I think that'd be cool. So I'm gonna have it, I'm gonna go to modulation number 2. I'm gonna use that same LFO because I like the speed it's at. So LFO 1, and I'm gonna have it modulate. Let's try oscillator 3 waves, see what that sounds like. And it's a little subtle. Let's mess with the filter. So we got 2 filters. Okay, I like that. We could actually use the LFO there to mess with the spacing between the filters. So let's go ahead and do that. Matrix, modulation 3, set LFO. Let's use LFO 2 because we want it to be a little faster. And then let's find the filter spacing. Filter spacing and the amount. So that makes the sound more alive. So let's go to LFO 2 and see what speed it's at. Let's sync it to 8th notes. No, it sounds good. Let's go back here and mess with the amount. Cool. Next thing we can do is we can start messing with the effects. So I'm going to add some drive to make it beefier. That's starting to sound really fat. And let's see what type of effects we got over here. So you can start messing with the mod amount. Pretty nice. Let's see what delay sounds like. So it's a little too long of a delay for me, and we'll change that. And let's add some reverb. Now it's starting to sound really fat. So let's do some more modulation. So let's go over here to preset under effects. Let's add a delay. I want the feedback to be very low. We don't want it to really affect the low frequencies. Sorry, sounded pretty awesome. And let's go back here. Ping pong is fine. Or redoubler would be cool. Like that. Let's go back, feedback. Cool. And so I like the sound of it when it rises, when the amount rises. So what we can do is actually go to the matrix and say, hey, I want the, where are you? Mod wheel to affect the modulation amount. And let's see what that sounds like. So now anytime I increase the mod wheel, the amount of the modulation will rise. So I want to do the same thing with the reverb. So let's go back to the matrix. Whoops. And I want to select the mod wheel. Then I want to select reverb amount. Where are you? Cool. And we don't want to get too crazy with that. So imagine you're, playing live or something. This is a good way to get some cool feedback from your synthesizer to do some really cool transitions. So let's say I'm building up to a drop or something, and I got playing something back. I can start increasing the mod wheel, and now the modulation is going to grow, and so is the what's it called? The reverb. And let's see what that sounds like. Then we have a pretty fat synth. And we could really get crazy with this if we wanted to. So unfortunately, my time is running out here, but that's a little demonstration on how the mod matrix can be used to create some cool patches on the Synth Pro. So if you like this video, let us know. Maybe we can make another one for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.